The 3rd century BC was an infamously violent era, marked by epic clashes and extraordinary personalities. The conquest of Alexander the Great sparked ongoing warfare among his successors, the Seleucid, Ptolemaic, and Antigonid empires. Concurrently, the rising Roman juggernaut began its series of conquests to unify the Italian peninsula and clashed with its Carthaginian rival, setting the stage for future dominance. During this period, India experienced transformative changes, culminating in the rise of the Mauryan Empire and the reign of Ashoka the Great. In 326 BC, Alexander the Great crossed the Hindu-Kush mountains and entered India for the first time, halting his seasoned army at the Indus River and demanding that 2 rival kings in the region, Amphis and Porus, submit to him. Amphis of Taxila surrendered to Alexander, but Porus of Porava resisted, leading to a pitched battle at the Hydaspes River, which Alexander won. Despite his victory, Alexander wished to conquer all of India and marched onward. However, his army mutinied at the Hephaestus River, forcing him to withdraw to Babylon. The refusal to advance further was partly due to rumors of a massive Indian kingdom to the east with innumerable legions. This was the Nanda Empire, centered in the Magadha region, which reportedly fielded a colossal force of 250,000 infantry, cavalry, chariots, war elephants. Although Alexander retreated, his conquest destabilized northern India, a fact that would play a key role in the events to come. When the historical whale lifts again in 320 BC, we see a man named Chandragupta Maria standing victorious. The origin of this Indian conqueror are unclear. Less favorable Brahmin sources state that he was a Sudra, a peasant or serf, while more favorable Buddhist texts designated him as a member of the prestigious Kshatriya, or warrior caste. He likely knew about Alexander's remarkable conquests and received a crash course in ancient warfare tactics and geopolitics, which he used to build his own empire. After gathering followers, he initially attacked the Nanda Empire's capital, but failed several times. Then he changed his tactics, conquering the northeastern lands weakened by Alexander and using his control of these prosperous regions to cut off supplies to the capital, leading to the fall of Nanda dynasty. Establishing his realm, he decisively defeated Seleucus and forged an alliance, famously gifting him 500 war elephants in exchange for peace and the hand of Seleucus' daughter in marriage. Chandragupta's successor, Bindusara, continued his father's wise domestic and foreign politics, including his friendship with Seleucus and his religious tolerance. Additionally, Bindusara expanded the empire southward into the Deccan Plateau. This video focuses on his second son, Ashoka, whose eldest brother was Susima and whose youngest brother was Tisa. It appeared that the future Mauryan emperor had little chance of ever inheriting the throne. For one, his mother, Sobhandragi, was a commoner, whereas the crown prince and favorite child, Susima, was born to a royal princess. Despite this, Indian princes were often sent to govern distant provinces, and Ashoka was no exception. At the age of 18, the youngest Mauryan royal was dispatched to the cosmopolitan Silk Road hub of Taxila to quell a revolt, a task he supposedly accomplished swiftly. The nature of Taxila as a scholarly and cosmopolitan settlement where intellectual debates were often held among different faiths likely broadened Ashoka's knowledge of the world, making him more tolerant and sophisticated. His next appointment was in the important city of Ujjain, the capital of Avanti province. The high quality of Ashoka governmentship is evident from the fact that he was entrusted with administrating his crucial legion, which connected the capital city at the coast. It was in Ujjain that Ashoka fell in love with Devi, the daughter of a trader. Interestingly, she was a member of the Shakya clan, the same clan as Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha himself. It is widely believed that she was a Buddhist. after she bore Ashoka 2 children, their son, Mahendra, and their daughter, Sanghamitra. Their relatively peaceful life was disrupted when in 274 BC, Emperor Bindusara passed away. What happened next is subject of much debate, but it is thought that a brief 4-year civil war ensued between Ashoka and his brothers. By acting decisively and swiftly occupying the capital city, and with the support of his father's ministers, Ashoka emerged victorious over his brothers and was crowned emperor in 270 BC. The same year, Hannibal Barca was born in Carthage. After ascending to the throne, Ashoka continued a policy of expansions and conquest. One reason for this presented policy of war was that during this period, all Indian rulers aspired to be regarded as the Chakravartin, the king of kings, by their royal rivals. Practical and economic reasons were also significant, as taxes were the Mauryan Empire's main source of revenue. The more land a king conquered, the more taxes he gained. However, this also led to increased administrative and military expenses, resulting in an endless cycle of violence. In 262 BC, the massive Mauryan army marched into the kingdom of Kalinga. Their past success likely made them confident of an easy victory, but the king and his army faced a tough, grinding conflict against a doggedly courageous enemy. It is said that Ashoka eventually won the war not because Kalinga surrendered, but because the courage was so terrible. After the final battle, the victorious monarch stood among his dead and dying foes on the battlefield. Most monarchs would have simply rejoiced in the grim victory, but Ashoka, in this moment, felt horror and remorse. This ended up being the key moment of his life. Supposedly, 150,000 were captured, 100,000 were slain, and many more died from famine and disease. More than just being horrified by the direct results of the devastation he had caused, Ashoka was also acutely aware of the tragedy that struck those left behind. The young sons left without fathers, or poor mothers who had been robbed of their sons, their families, and loved ones. The educated and sensitive Ashoka appeared to have become truly aware of the real cost of war, even admitting publicly what no victorious ruler had ever confessed before, that he felt remorse for having conquered Kalinga. He declared that even 100 or 1,000 part of those who were slain, died, or captured in Kalinga, considered regenerable by the beloved of the gods. This was clearly not the same man who had annihilated his brothers and seized the throne by blood. Rather, it was a changed man. This man ultimately acknowledged his mistakes and reflected on the futility and the tragedy of war. From then on, he declared that he would no longer be provoked into taking up arms and devoted his life and considerable wealth to creating a society based on principle of virtue and ethical behavior. This sudden shift in perspective gradually led Ashoka to the teaching of Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha who had advocated for peace, non-violence, and compassion 2 centuries earlier. Ashoka had likely been aware of Buddhism from an early age, as his wife was a follower of Buddhist teachings, and the faith was popular in various segments of society. Nonetheless, he was the first king in history to embrace this apparently revolutionary religion. Contrary to popular belief, Ashoka did not immediately convert to Buddhism after his epiphany on the battlefield. Instead, he chose a deliberate and practical path that would benefit both himself and the well-being of his subjects. He made a concentrated effort to remain tolerant of the 2 other major Indian religions, Hindu Brahmanism and Jainism. In one of his major edicts carved into rock, he stated that criticizing other religions or excessively raising one's own is detrimental and should be avoided. He began studying under Buddhist monks, and 2 years later, he was formally admitted into the Sangha, the Buddhist order. His teacher was a monk named Upagupta from Mathura, who guided the king on a pilgrimage to significant sites of their shared faith. such as Lumbini, where Siddhartha Gautama was born, Bodh Gaya, where he attained enlightenment, Surnath, where he delivered his first sermon, and Kushinagar, where he passed away and achieved nirvana. At these locations and others, Ashoka erected pillars and inscribed edicts and royal decrees on rocks. These proclamations were frequently read to the illiterate populace by officials of the empire and appeared to be personal messages from Ashoka himself, written in his own words. It feels as if the king's voice continues to resonate with us 2,500 years later when we read these inscriptions today. His shift in faith also reshaped his role as a ruler. Instead of seeking material gain, as many previous kings had, he now focused on the well-being of his people in both this life and the next. He mandated that the petitioners could approach him with their concerns, no matter where he was or what time it was. Despite this piety and benevolence, it is important to remember that Ashoka was primarily an emperor, not a religious teacher or philosopher. He had the responsibility of governing an empire, and this role did not always result in peaceful outcomes. There was a real risk that Ashoka professed pacifism could lead to a rebellious in the provinces and invasions by neighboring kings, who might perceive weakness in the Mauryan leadership. However, although he had renounced aggressive expansions, the emperor was determined to defend his empire with vigor and refused to disband his army. Every rebellion was ruthlessly suppressed, and any foreign invader faced formidable military force, a fact he made clear to his subjects. He also remained a somewhat stern, paternal figure, benevolent and caring, but prepared to impose harsh penalties if necessary. His inscriptions almost seem to implore his people not to compel him to enforce these penalties. For instance, the forest people, or Adivasi, were warned that despite Ashoka's remorse, he still had the power and resolve to punish them for their injustices. If necessary, they should feel ashamed of their wrongs to avoid severe consequences. Ashoka worked hard to change the attitudes of his subjects, not to impose Buddhism upon them, but to promote universally right values. The emperor, who had previously relished hunting expeditions and wielded a formidable sword, now undertook Dhamma yatras, or sacred pilgrimages, visiting holy sites and engaging with his people. He often conversed with local residents to ensure their welfare and listened to their praises or grievances regarding local officials. In this manner, he became the first Indian king to genuinely consider the well-being of the poor, rather than merely using them for tax revenue. As he declared, the finest conquest is the conquest of right and not might. The principle he aimed to propagate were known as Ashoka's Dharma, a nuanced term that referred to standards of ethical behavior in this context. For instance, Ashoka wished for people to be respectful toward their parents and teachers, to act properly towards holy men, relatives, servants, friends, and the poor, and to show kindness and generosity to the elderly and vulnerable. Non-violent towards all living beings, including humans, birds, and animals, was to be practiced. One edict specifically addressed the cessation of the large-scale slaughter of animals in the imperial kitchens. Alongside promoting these noble virtues to his people, Ashoka also strived to embody the same principles. This was evident in his thoughtful approach to constructing and improving infrastructures. He ordered shade trees to be planted along roads for protection from the sun and rain, mango groves to provide nourishment, and water sources to quench a traveler's thirst. In 253 BC, a major gathering of Buddhist monks took place in Pataliputra, hosted by the king himself. At this third Buddhist council, a significant decision was made to send teams of bhikkhus, or Buddhist monks, to foreign lands to spread the teaching of the Buddha. These missionaries are said to have traveled as far as Kashmir, Gandhara, the Greek Hellenistic kingdoms, North Africa, Burma, and Sri Lanka. One of these travelers was a man named Dhammarakita, referred to as Iona or Ionian in the texts, suggesting he might have been a Greek convert. However, the most renowned missionary of the time was Prince Mahendra, Ashoka's firstborn son in 249 BC. Mahendra traveled to Sri Lanka, then known as Thambapani, at the invitation of King Devamipiatisa, who admired Ashoka and wanted to learn more about Buddhist teachings. The mission proved so successful that Sri Lanka gradually became a Buddhist country and continues to be one to this day. Such was the enduring legacy of Ashoka the Great. When he passed away in 232 BC, Ashoka was 72 years old and had reigned for 38 remarkable years. Though his death marked the beginning of the slow decline of the Mauryan Empire, which eventually fell under another 50 years, Ashoka had governed the largest indigenous empire in Indian history with wisdom, efficiency, and most importantly, compassion.